Yeah, so estrogen dominance, we're seeing that when GABA gets displaced, then estradiol, which is protective, goes to estrone. I'm getting very biochemically oriented, but I think these are huge discoveries that I've made, and the population at large needs to know because people are going to get really sick. So estrone is very inflammatory estrogen. It's not the one you want. And we also tie them to your body's ability not only to detoxify, but the genes associated with those levels of detoxification. And so when I look at anyone related to estrogen, I look at genes of the methylation C677T gene, because that goes to how you recycle estrogen, goes to how you make bile salts, goes to how you break down hormones. I also look to the polymorphisms of COMT, which goes to catechols. It also goes to estrogen recycling. It's also been linked to estrogen cancers. But I also look to genes that go to how you manage fat metabolism, because what's going on? Insulin's a fat, estrogen's a fat, neurotransmitters are a fat. The brain needs fats for its functioning. Almost 60% or almost 70% of the brain is made up of fat. We need fat to cover the myelin, to create myelin, which covers the nerves. A lot of these viruses that are being reactivated are neurotoxic. So they're affecting myelin capacity. And so you have to make myelin, you make myelin by breaking down fats, including hormones and neurohormones. And we also need proteins, and those peptides are being affected. So we look at the genes of APO, that goes to, it's also the Alzheimer's gene, but it's a cholesterol making gene. We look at the genes of PEMT, which is how you make choline. Choline is necessary to break down excess estrogen. We look at the genes of the CYP450, which is phase 1 liver detoxification, because those have a lot to do with pharmaceuticals. And if you're taking birth control and you can't break down estrogen anymore, and that phase 1 liver detoxification is impaired, now you got a backup system, and now you're either more fat malabsorbed, more neurologically vulnerable, more mentally vulnerable. So we look at all of those genes, and in my practice, we get a feedback loop through muscle testing. Is how are they behaving? Are they expressed or are they not? Genes are always going to be our genes, but it's how they behave. And when they're expressed against our favor, we have a problem.
So there's some supplements when you look up estrogen dominance that everyone is, commonly using, like DIM and like glutathione, sulforaphane. These, I know for me, they would be the exact wrong thing to take. So can you explain why they would be wrong, why they could actually make things worse for somebody, and what symptoms to look out for if someone is on these supplements and they're not feeling great, and to really figure out what is going on?
Yes. So DIM is made up of indole-3 carbinol, but DIM is made from cruciferous vegetables. And Sarah, you've noted that you have a sulfur sensitivity publicly. I do too. So taking DIM to manage estrogen and from a sulfur perspective alone could be problematic, because sulfur also has to do with all of our neurotransmitters, and it has to do with our body's ability to manage its gut biome and the mucin layer. So if you're taking sulfur-rich DIM, it could be problematic. Another reason why DIM could be problematic, and it can break down estrogen, but it's also because it's crucifers. Crucifers are goitrogens, so it's going to affect your thyroid function. So DIM can affect the thyroid function in that way. So by taking DIM, if you have sulfur processing genes that are a problem, if you're hypothyroid, okay, you're going to really create a metabolic disruption and turn on your sulfur genes, which then are going to affect your GI tract, which is also where thyroid hormones are made and where 70% of our immune system is made, and where we recycle estrogen. So it could really, really back your system up. Similarly, glutathione. Glutathione has been touted as a master antioxidant, and it's so good for phase 1 liver detoxification. Well, maybe I've had several clients that have taken glutathione and have ended up at the Mayo Clinic with neurological disorders, with idiopathic body sores, with psoriasis of a caliber that their face looks and their bodies look like equivalent to a tree trunk. We've had, in my case, I also have a sulfur sensitivity. When I was prescribed or recommended glutathione, when I had a viral overload, I felt like I was sticking my finger into an electrical socket because it turned on that sulfation pathway, which is neurological. So buyer beware. Not all supplements that pull estrogen are the right ones for you and can actually back up the liver, creating more of an estrogen recycling issue.
So what does someone do if they're estrogen dominant and their doctor had put them on DIM and now they're listening to you? They're not going to touch it. They're throwing it in the trash can. But what do they do?
Well, you first have to understand your genes, really know your genes and what are your genes. And so again, back to those estrogen genes, that C677T gene, that COMP gene, those VDR genes. Do you have a sulfur sensitivity? Do you have a mold sensitivity? Right? Because a lot of people use mushrooms and as an adaptogen for immune system. But if you've got mold, mold feeds candida, candida builds estrogen, estrogen builds candida, you've got that whole path as a problem. So even therapeutic mushrooms could be a problem. So first we have to find out, can the body tolerate a burden of an additional hormone or pre-hormone? If it can, and you're not super fat malabsorbed, then instead of trying to pull estrogen, let's try to raise progesterone, because if you're estrogen dominant, maybe you just need a little bit of bump in progesterone with chaste tree berry or Vitex, right? We may need an aromatase inhibitor such as nettle, which is so good, especially for mothers who are pregnant. We might need a little bit of choline. Choline is a fat emulsifier that can help manage that estrogen burden through the COMP gene and the methylation C gene. And choline has been known to manage that DNA methylation, also extremely safe during pregnancy and breastfeeding. So for those moms out there that are estrogen dominant that have had multiple miscarriages, hey guys, choline is a huge deal. And if you're recycling estrogen, you need that choline, and you may need other cofactors such as vitamin C to help with that adrenal function. And you might need a little bit of zinc to manage that insulin and that thyroid function. So choline is super important. Saw palmetto, believe it or not, I've used in many cases. It's usually used as a prostate support supplement, but that can also be a really good aromatase inhibitor. But we muscle test everything to find out what's the best thing for you. Some cases, none of those work because you're so freaking fat malabsorbed, and what you need are bile salts or even your accelerated salt to create that emulsification to break down the hormones that you're already making, but you can't use them in the right way. Even taking hormone precursors is not enough, or even these other supplements that I've suggested. Sometimes simple sea salt